Clashes between rival military factions could be heard overnight in parts of Sudan's capital, residents said on Wednesday. And that's despite a week-long ceasefire designed to allow for the delivery of aid and lay the ground for a more lasting truce.
Civilians must be spared, and you must stop this senseless violence now.
In Geneva, the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, described the situation as heartbreaking.
In spite of successive ceasefires, and they keep making these arrangements, we see that they get observed in their breach almost within hours after these arrangements are signed. We see how civilians continue to be exposed to serious risk of death and injury. I mean, overnight we received reports of fighter jets across Khartoum and clashes in some areas of the city, as well as gunfire heard in Khartoum North and in Durman.
Turk also said he was deeply troubled by reports of sexual violence in Khartoum and Darfur. He called on Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, leader of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, to issue clear instructions to those under their command, that there is zero tolerance for sexual violence and that perpetrators of all violations would be held accountable. The ceasefire deal, following Saudi and US-mediated talks, comes after 5 weeks of intense warfare. Previous truces have failed to stop the fighting, which has sent more than 1 million people fleeing their homes and plunged the country deep into a humanitarian crisis.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.
And there they go. It looks like
The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.